Welcome to week 7 of Explore the Bible. Today we continue in the book of John and our journey through there. Man, it's a new year. I hope you're having a great 2023 beginning. Looking forward to all that God's going to do this year. Looking forward to this passage in John. Before we look at it, be sure and subscribe, like, comment, share it with others. You hit that subscribe button on YouTube, and that way you'll get a notice every time. I think you have to hit the subscribe and then hit the little bell. You'll get a notice every time the videos drop on Monday morning. Looking forward to this, and early on here in the year, I'm going to be doing some other videos about kind of how you do class, how you do your Sunday school class, and how trying to help you be a better teacher just in general and organizing your class and those kind of things. So looking forward to that. But let's look at John chapter 5. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he'd already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." Okay, so we see Jesus coming to have this conversation with this man who is there for 38 years. He's been there for 38 years. Let me just, one more time. He has been there for 38 years. I don't know that we have an ability to understand that. You know, he's been 38 years paralyzed. This is a tough thing. It's a difficult life. And there was this belief here at this pool that if you were taken down in when the water was stirred, if you were to go down in it, that if you had some disease or illness or infirmity, that you would be healed from it. It was, well, popular belief, but maybe not exactly um, biblical or true or honest. But maybe they had seen it happen, and so they had this belief. And Jesus sees him, and he says he knows there's been there, and he asked him this question that seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Do you want to get well? We say it seems obvious, but it's not always obvious. Do you know people that live in the midst of emotional struggles, financial struggles, relationship struggles, and it doesn't appear that they really want out of that? That for whatever reason they keep doing things to put themselves back in that position. It almost seems like that's where they'd rather be. It's a good question. Do you want to be well? Do you want to get healed? And he clearly he does. He's like, well, I've got no one to put me in the pool. Now this may be the pool of Siloam, right? This is a potential place, and this is the pool of Siloam. I put this up just because I'd seen that this was going to be excavated soon. He's probably where there's a blind man that gets healed there, and not this paralyzed man. But it's interesting that there's still these excavations taking place, which always, every time they do an archaeological excavation, they reveal some place that's real, some place that is actually recorded in Scripture. And I put that there because I want you to understand that all of this is in history. Okay, the Gospels are rooted in history. The Bible is rooted in history. So these real places exist, and every time they question something, they find some archaeological dig, they confirm what's in Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament, always. And that's important for us to know that these things are historical. Okay, this is a real event. These are real places that people could have disproven easily in that time, and no one did. "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." And instantly the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. He didn't have to go down in the pool. The Lord just said, "Get up and you'll be healed." And he got up and instantly picked up his mat and he started to walk. Now that day was the Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat." He replied, "The man who made me well told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" I want to remind you, this guy's been there for 38 years. Do you think the Jews knew who this guy was? Do you think that they recognized him? Is it possible? Is it probable that they knew that he was the guy that had been by the pool for 38 years? I think it's probable, don't you? It's probable. And when they saw that he was healed, their word to him was, hey, you shouldn't be carrying your mat today. Now, this is not a biblical prohibition. This is an extra biblical prohibition. In essence, what happens is, you've got the Ten Commandments, right? And one of the commandments is remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And so, as time progressed, the question would be asked of Jewish leaders by Jewish people, what does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy? That's a legitimate question, isn't it? What does it mean? And we answer that question in a lot of different ways. I live in the state of Texas. Texas, for a long time, had what were called blue laws, which meant that there were no businesses that were allowed to be open on Sunday except for a certain few that were allowed to be open on Sunday. All the rest of them had to stay closed. And those blue laws have been rescinded for most businesses now. And we know you can go pretty much do anything on a Sunday. But I've been in Greece, and in Greece, most of the shops are closed on Sunday. That's a recognition that here's what it means for us, that moving that day of worship from Saturday, the Sabbath, to Sunday, the day of Christ's resurrection. So they had this question. Well, one of the answers that was given over time was, well, you shouldn't carry anything too heavy, so you can't carry your mat. That's too big. That's too much. That's work. You're not keeping the Sabbath holy. Now, I think we look at this, and in our culture, wherever you are in your culture, you may have this idea of what it means to keep it holy, and you may look at that and go, well, that's silly. But then we have other restrictions and other things that we think are right and things that are wrong, don't we? We all do that, and certainly this was theirs. And he said, well, look, that man that healed me, he told me to pick up my mat and walk. So I picked up my mat and walked, because I got healed. They didn't care that he'd been healed from 38 years. They were upset that the law was being broken as they saw it, right? Who is this man who told you, pick up your mat and walk, they asked. Now, is it because they were so intrigued by the fact that he healed them, or was it because this man, in healing you, broke the laws of the Sabbath? Now, just think about the crazy irony of that. I'm glad we don't ever get caught up in our legalism today, do we? So that we get upset about you didn't keep the law. I don't care if what you did was right. You didn't keep the law. I don't care if it was good. I don't care if it was the greatest thing that had ever happened to you. That doesn't really matter to me because you didn't keep the law. Right? Pick up your mat and walk, they asked. But who is that man? But the man who was healed did not know who it was because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. He said, I don't know. I don't know. He didn't have the benefit of having followed Jesus around because he couldn't walk. For 38 years, he'd been in that one place, and he hadn't heard all these. He didn't know who Jesus was. So when he gets asked this question, do you want to get well? He's like, well, yeah, but I can't get down to the pool. And then Jesus says, well, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And he got up, and he picked up his mat, and Jesus is gone. And so now he says, I don't know. I don't know who it was. But then later, after this, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, now, don't lose this, that Jesus found him in the temple. Why was this man in the temple? Because he'd just been healed from being lame for 38 years. And he was in the temple to worship God. Whether he was paying an offering of some sort, giving a thanks offering, he was beginning a cleansing process, whatever this was, he was in the temple to worship God. Remember that time when Jesus healed the lepers? But only the 10 lepers, but only one of them came back to offer thanks. He finds this guy in the temple, and he said to him, "See, you're well." That tells you Jesus didn't hang around long enough. He was gone quickly, which is what the guy said, right? Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you. We'll come back to that. The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. Okay. Jesus is not saying that the reason you were lame for 38 years, is because there was sin in your life. Jesus is not saying that if you sin more, you're going to get disabled again, or maybe you're going to go deaf or blind or you're going to get run over by a truck. He's not saying that. What he is saying is that if you live in your sin, the worst thing is that you could spend eternity apart from me. Now, he's not saying you're going to earn this, right? Jesus is not giving him a command that cannot be kept to say you can never sin again. But he is saying, walk away from sin. Don't live in sin because you don't want to spend eternity apart from me. This man then goes and tells the Jews it was Jesus. I think it's easy to see this guy was naive about what was happening. And they had asked, and he found out it was Jesus, so he goes and he tells them, hey, it was Jesus that did that. And look at the response from the Jewish leadership. They began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. There was one more thing added to the list. He's done it again. He's healing people on the Sabbath. He's telling people to violate Sabbath rules by picking up their mat and walking. This Jesus is a menace. Interesting, isn't it? How for them, for this part, it wasn't about authority. I guess maybe it was, but it was really about laws. And he's not following our laws. He's not following our customs. He's not doing things that we think are the way it ought to be done. Boy, we really need to be careful that we don't make these same mistakes, right? That we elevate things to a level of expectation that God has not put on us. That we take things and we expect things that God has never expected from us. That we make demands on others that God has never made on them. And that we fail to rejoice in the goodness and the power and the work of God because we are so concerned about the standards, the laws, the rules, the whatever they are, the outside things that we have placed on ourselves and on others. All right. Hope that's helped. Thanks for watching the video this week. God bless you for teaching. God bless you for teaching. Thanks so much for doing that. Subscribe to the channel. Like. If you've got any comments, questions, share it with others. We appreciate that, and we will see you next time.